4 decades, various capacities. And he's also very well known for his very melodious kirtan. He has learned and received a formal training in North Indian classical music, sings and plays instruments in traditional Bengali style of kirtan, and has made several recordings also of the Gaudiya Vaishnava's traditional Sanskrit and vernacular hymns. And some of his wonderful kirtan is available on iskondesati.com. We can hear. And currently he also serves as a Sanskrit-English translator and editor for the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, BBT. He's also known as a scholar of Sanskrit, Hindi, and other Indic languages. He served as a member of Shastric Advisory Council to the ISKCON GBC. And apart from this wonderful services, he also travels widely, lecturing for many years on Vedic literature, such as Bhagavad Gita, SrimadBhagavtam, and other Prabhupada books. So it's our great fortune that once again we have got this wonderful opportunity to hear from Prabhuji. And we have seen that how he takes us through all the wonderful commentary of Acharya also, so that we can understand the deeper meaning of the verses. So let's together welcome Prabhuji by chanting Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. His Grace Mukunda Prabhu ki jai. Please, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. You're very kind. It's a great honor to be able to speak something in an attempt to glorify the Supreme Personality of Godhead as per the teachings of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, here in this forum. So I really appreciate the opportunity. And without further ado, we should chant Mangalacharanam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Cheva Narottamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam. Tato Jayamudirayet. Nashtaprayeshva Bhadreshu. Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke. Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Krishne Swadhamo Bhagate. Dharmajnanadhipisah. Kalau Nashtatrashamesha. Puranarko Dhunoditaha. Grantaraj SrimadBhagavtam. This is Canto 1, Chapter 5, texts 20 through 28. I believe we'll not have a translation, correct?
Yes, Prabhu. Yes, Prabhu. Due to time constraint, Prabhu will not have, Prabhuji.
Okay, because there's a lot of material to cover here. So we'll just we'll begin.
Yes.
With text 20, Idam hi vishvam bhagavani vetaro yatro jagatsthaniroro tasambhavaha tadhi swayam veda bhavams tathapite pradeshamatram bhavatah pradarshitam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is Himself this cosmos, and still He is aloof from it. From Him only this cosmic manifestation emanated. In Him it rests, and into Him it enters after annihilation. Your good self knows all about this. I've only given a synopsis. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. For a pure devotee, the conception of Mukunda, the Lord Sri Krishna, is both personal and impersonal. The impersonal cosmic situation is also Mukunda because it is the emanation of the energy of Mukunda. For example, a tree is the complete unit, whereas the leaves and branches of the tree are emanated parts and parcels of the tree. The leaves and branches of the tree are also the tree, but the tree itself is neither the leaves nor the branches. I'm going to summarize here because some of these purports are a little bit long, and there are certain things that have more explanation required. So the point that Narad Muni is here making to his disciple is that although the Lord is one with everything, His creation, still He's different, and you have not emphasized that difference enough. This is what he's getting at. Later on in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, the parts and parcels of the body being detached from the whole body are no longer the same hand or leg as when they are attached to the body. Similarly, a godless civilization detached from the transcendental loving service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is just like a detached hand or leg. Very graphic example here. His whole point is that, Vyas, you have written so many nice things, Mahabharata, and you have written all the Shastras you put together, but you have not adequately glorified Krishna, and that's wrong. Because if Krishna is not explicit in human society, if Krishna is not explicit in the way that we glorify the Lord, then it's like a hand, which is still a hand, but it's detached from the body, not good. So he also points out that Vyasadeva knows this very well. So he's further advised by Srila Nada to expand the idea so that the entrapped conditioned souls may take lessons from him to understand the Supreme Lord. Moving ahead, Srila Prabhupada says, the external energy, Lord has two energies. He has internal energy, he has external energy. The external energy is comparatively inferior, whereas the internal energy is superior. The superior energy is a living force, and therefore she is completely identical. But the external energy, being inert, is partially identical. Interesting to note the feminine pronoun here. Superior energy, that's us, spirit souls, we're all feminine. But we're qualitatively one with the Lord, but quantitatively separate. So this is why, and our superiority is that we are not dull matter, we're conscious. We're part of the Supreme. We have the same qualities as the Supreme. Dull matter is not conscious. Dull matter cannot render devotional service on its own. So it's partially identical. Identical in the sense that it emanates from God, but not identical in the sense that it's not the same thing as spirit. We are. That is the thing. So he goes on to say, the human being and all other living beings are the products of his internal energies. Thus, the living being is also identical with the Lord, but he is never equal or superior to the personality of Godhead. Misguided living beings, therefore, must accept the supremacy of the Lord and agree to render loving service unto him. This is the purport. For this, they have been created. Without this, there cannot be any peace or tranquility in the world. Srila Vyasadeva is advised by Srila Nada to expand this idea in the Bhagavatam. In the Bhagavad Gita, also the same idea is explained. Surrender fully unto the lotus feet of the Lord. That is the only business of the perfect human being. Okay, so Sridhar Swami in his comment, he mentions, He Shabdena, Sarvam Khalvidam Brahma, Ityadi Pramanam Suchitam. He suggests here the word Idam Hi Vishwas, Idam, he. All this, he's suggesting the Chandogya Upanishad mantra, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma. All this is Brahma, famous Mahavakya from the Upanishads. And he also points out that by reminding Vyasadeva that he knows all this, Narad Muni wants to suggest Acharyavan Purusho Veda Ityadi Shruti Artha Sampadanaya Pradarshitam. A person who has an acharya is supposed to know everything, or at least he's supposed to know something. And Narad Muni is indirectly chastising Vyasadeva. He said, you're my disciple and you're talking like this? You should know better. This is the purport. So, Idam Vishvam Bhagavan Eva Natu Bhagavan Eva Syat. Jiva Goswami tells us in his Krama Sandarbha that although this universe, this cosmic manifestation is Krishna, but it is at the same time not Krishna. That is the point. Bhagavatas tat karanatvat paratvam. Bhagavan is above this. Why? Because he is the cause of this thing. All right. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur tells us, now Nada teaches about knowledge of the worshipable Lord, which is necessary for the devotees. This is called Sambandha Gyan. Without Sambandha Gyan, there's no question of actually properly applying devotional service, what to speak of gaining the goal of that service, which is love of Godhead. It's necessary to reform our intelligence so that we can reform our activities, which will reform our hearts. And then we can actually realize love of Godhead. So he points out the universe is described as a form of the Lord in small portion, like the Lord, because it's an effect of the Lord. But because the Lord is the cause, he's different. That we've heard already from Jiva Goswami. So he again reminds him here, you know all this spontaneously because you're an avatar of the Lord. Thus, I have shown only a small portion. In order to fulfill the statement, Acharyavan Purusho Veda, one who has a teacher knows. That's also from Chandogya Upanishad. Okay, so in text 21, Narad Muni continues, Tvam Atma Atmanam Avehya Mokha Drik Parasya Pungsa Paramatmanaha Kalam Ajam Prajatam Jagataha Shivayatan Mahanubhavabhyudayo Adhigamyatam. Your goodness has perfect vision. You yourself can know the super soul, the personality of Godhead, because you are present as the plenary portion of the Lord. Although you are birthless, you have appeared on this earth for the well-being of all people. Please, therefore, describe the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, more vividly. He gets right to the point. And Srila Prabhupada also in his purport says, Srila Vyasadeva is the empowered plenary portion, incarnation of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. He descended by his causeless mercy to deliver the fallen souls of the material world. Does anybody know a verse confirming that? Adhyatma Deepa Mati Tirishatam Tanondham. This is back, well, it's in the same canto actually, glorifying Vyas. Out of his causeless mercy, he's shining light among all of us who are in the darkness of ignorance, especially in Kali Yuga, in the form of this SrimadBhagavtam. So although formally, Srila Narada Rishi is his spiritual master, Srila Vyasadeva is not at all dependent on a spiritual master because in essence, he is the spiritual master of everyone else. But because he's doing the work of an acharya, he taught us by his own conduct that one must have a spiritual master, even though he be God himself. So don't think that Vyasa is in ignorance here. Vyasadeva is actually the guru of everyone. But what is he teaching us as our guru? What is he teaching us? He's teaching us that you need a guru because you fall into Maya. Therefore, he has to pretend that he's come into Maya as well, and then pretend to take shelter of a guru in the form of his own devotee, Narad Muni. And we'll see what he does with this. We move on here. Ganyatam, Tat Ganyatam. Please explain more fully, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says. Adhikam, the most auspicious glories, Abhyudaya, of the Almighty Lord, Mahanubhava. Text 22, very famous verse. Many of you, I think, probably know this verse. Idam hi pungsas tabataha shrutasya va shristasya shuddasya cha buddhirattayoho avichyutortha kavibhir nirupito yad uttama shloka gunanuvarnanam. Learned circles have positively concluded that the infallible purpose of the advancement of knowledge, namely austerity, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting hymns, and charity, culminates in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry. That's why he's called Uttama Shloka. The best transcendental shlokas glorify him. This is the point. Purport: human intellect is developed for advancement of learning in art, science, philosophy, physics, chemistry, psychology, economics, politics, etc. By culture of such knowledge, the human society can attain perfection of life. This perfection of life culminates in the realization of the Supreme Being, Vishnu. The Shruti therefore directs that those who are actually advanced in learning should aspire for the service of Lord Vishnu. I'm going to skip ahead again. Those who are entrapped by Vishnu Maya utilize advancement of knowledge for sense enjoyment. Does it sound familiar? Now they're trying to figure out, Russia has very diligently studied physics and come up with special weapons that can go many times the speed of sound in order to defeat their enemies. In other words, they want to become bigger dogs than all the other dogs leading all the other nations in the world. And similarly, China is also trying to take over everything in sight, just like a dog tries to pee on as many trees as he can before he gets defeated by a bigger dog. And similarly, America is scrambling to regain its former hegemony in the geopolitical order of things. This is what Prabhupada is describing. All very sophisticated, very advanced, very intelligent people. But those who are entrapped by Vishnu Maya utilize advancement of knowledge for sense enjoyment. The same sense enjoyment that you can have if you're a pig running up and down the nullies of Vrindavan with your mouth wide open, trying to scoop up the black water and stool. So it's pretty gross, this material world. When advancement of knowledge is applied in the service of the Lord, however, the whole process becomes absolute. Yoga Maya and Mahamaya, they look exactly the same. They function in the same way, but the results are very different. This is the point. And although it's difficult to distinguish whether someone is acting out of Yoga Maya or Mahamaya, it's very difficult to distinguish for us. Still, it's very important. Prabhupada continues, therefore, all the sages and devotees of the Lord have recommended that the subject matter of art, science, philosophies, physics, chemistry, psychology, and all other branches of knowledge should be wholly and solely applied in the service of the Lord. Art, literature, poetry, painting, etc. may be used in glorifying the Lord. The fiction writers, poets, and celebrated literateurs are generally engaged in writing of sensuous subjects. But if they can turn towards the service of the Lord, they can describe the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. And he gives the example of Valmiki, great poet, and Vyasdev, great philosopher. Similarly, science and philosophy should also be applied in the service of the Lord. There's no use in presenting dry speculative theories for sense gratification. This is the point. Nowadays, nobody really is interested in philosophy. No one's really interested in education. Why? Because it's all geared towards sense gratification only. Even the philosophers, who are the main philosophers in the world today? You're going to find that it is atheistic philosophies. And in being atheistic philosophies, they have no choice except to dedicate all their intelligence and all their energy and efforts towards sense gratification, just like the hogs that we've already mentioned. So philosophy and science should be engaged to establish the glory of the Lord. All so-called knowledge not engaged in the service of the Lord is but nescience. Scientific knowledge engaged in the service of the Lord and all similar activities are factually Hari Kirtan. This is an interesting point. Srila Prabhupada's definition of Sankirtana, it very much amplifies the traditional understanding of that word. Generally, when we say Sankirtana or Hari Kirtan, we think a circle of devotees chanting the holy names with drums and cymbals. But Srila Prabhupada, following his own spiritual master, felt that the printing press was like a mridanga for the greater kirtan of glorification of the Lord on a global scale. Publishing and distributing books, etc. This is a point made by Tamal Krishna Goswami in his 2012 book, Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti, published by Oxford University Press. This propagational aspect of Sankirtana compounds its sacred significance. What comes to mind when considering Prabhupada's use of the term Sankirtan, therefore, is its public dimension, more reminiscent of the street processions organized by Chaitanya and his followers than their indoor kirtans. Suggestive of Chaitanya's ongoing mission, the term possesses a referential breadth in ISKCON so wide-ranging in its associations that at times one must strain to make the connection. One scholar named Burke Roquefort has traced the undulating patterns of ISKCON's Sankirtan activities as they metamorphosized from street chanting to book distribution to diverse initiatives of fundraising, etc., etc. So Tamal Krishna Goswami here concludes, Sankirtana has become a catchword to sacralize any conceivable act that may fortify ISKCON and thus contribute, however indirectly, to Krishna's glory. This is very nicely stated. He's characteristically caught the very gist of what Prabhupada was trying to do. So this is the point of this verse. All branches of human knowledge are ultimately meant to glorify God, and we have to figure out how to do that. Prabhupada did so, inspired by his own spiritual master, and given that instruction, Prabhupada was successful. And all of us should continue in this way. Why? Acharyavan Purusho Veda. We are supposed to get it, and we're supposed to share it with the world in maybe novel ways and means, but in effective ways and means. This is the point. Okay, so Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his commentary here says, he's quoting from SrimadBhagavtam, 11th canto, chapter 20, texts 32 and 33. Everything that can be achieved by karma, penance, gyan, vaidagya, yoga, charity, dharma, and all of their auspicious means of perfecting life is easily achieved by my devotee through bhakti. If somehow or other my devotee desires svarga, liberation, or residence in my abode, he easily achieves such benedictions. According to this, all dharmas are unnecessary, or another meaning is that because performance of bhakti to the Lord is the conclusion of all the scriptural statements recommending austerity, etc., chanting the Lord's name is the unmistakably mentioned process here. All right, text 23. Aham puratita bhave bhavam mune dasyastu kasyaschana vedavadinam niropito balaka eva yoginam shushrushane pravrishi nirvivikshatam. Here, beginning with this text for the next 5 verses, now we're changing gears. Narad Muni is no longer giving reasons that Vyasadeva has to directly glorify the Lord. Now he's giving examples of how he himself became Krishna conscious. Narad Muni is giving his own story. He says here, O Muni, in my past life, in the last millennium, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant, engaged in the service of Brahmanas who were following the principles of Vedanta. Service to the Brahmanas who were following the principles of Vedanta. They're called Vedavadis here, or Vedantavadis. Srila Prabhupada calls them Bhakti Vedantas. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, that's Chaturmasya, I was engaged in their personal service. Now, here's where the commentaries become very lengthy and very insightful as well. Let's hear what Srila Prabhupada says. Report. The wonder of an atmosphere surcharged with devotional service to the Lord is briefly described herein by Sri Narad Muni. He was the son of the most insignificant parentage. He was not properly educated. Still, because his complete energy was engaged in the service of the Lord, he became an immortal sage. Devarshi, he's called, sage of the gods. From a maidservant son, he became the guru of all the demigods. Such is the powerful action of devotional service. He goes on to say, from the personal example of Sri Narad Muni in his previous birth, it is clear that the service of the Lord begins with the service of the Lord's bona fide servants. Very important point. This has been discussed many times by our acharyas. Punya Tirtha Nishevanat. I'm thinking back to the second chapter of this canto. The words are used there. If you want to get a taste for hearing about Vasudeva, you have to serve the servants. And what kind of servants? Punya Tirthas. What does Punya Tirtha mean? Nishpapa. Somebody who is free from sin. Punya Tirthas. This is, I think it was Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's definition. The Lord says that the service of his servants is greater than his personal service. Service of the devotee is more valuable than the service of the Lord. One should therefore choose the bona fide servant of the Lord, constantly engaged in his service, accept such a servant as the spiritual master, and engage himself in his, the spiritual master's, service. Such a spiritual master is the transparent medium by which to visualize the Lord, who is beyond the conception of the material senses. By service of the bona fide spiritual master, the Lord consents to reveal himself in proportion to the service rendered. So wonderfully, Srila Prabhupada has stated it. Bookmark this. Srila Prabhupada many times told us that he chose his words very, very carefully when writing his books. Therefore, he was very concerned at any time if anyone changed his words. He said everything can be ruined by that. And he said in particular, he put everything into the first canto, which we're now studying. So these words are very, very potent, very important. We should listen very carefully. Srila Prabhupada also says here, the expert spiritual master knows the art of utilizing everything to glorify the Lord. We've already discussed that. And therefore, under his guidance, the whole world can be turned into the spiritual abode by the divine grace of the Lord's servants. Okay, so Sridhar Swami points out here, how is it that this Narad Muni was able to attain his perfection? Qua? Yoginam sushrushane, by serving the yogis, the bhakti yogis, in other words. Pravrashi, what does pravrashi mean in this word? Varshopalakshite chaturmasye, the 4 months of the rainy season. He was staying in one place with them. That was his program. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, there is no cause for pure bhakti other than the fortunate mercy of the devotees of the Lord. Austerity and other processes are not the cause. Bookmark that, because I'm going to try to return to that point in a minute. You cannot get bhakti just by austerity. The only cause is the mercy of devotees. And to illustrate this, Narad Muni recounts his previous birth in a previous day of Brahma. He was born of a maidservant from some who were studying the Vedas. And he was engaged in the service of those persons, and he stayed in one place. He practiced bhakti yoga. That's understood from text 26, which we'll come to in a moment, of this same chapter. All right, for now, text 24. Te mayyape dakhila chapa lerabhage dante adhrita kridanake anuvartini chakruh kripam yadyapi tulya darshanaha Sushrusamane Muniyolpa Bhashini. He's describing what were his characteristics. He says, although they were impartial by nature, those followers of Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled. I had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty, and I did not speak more than required. There's one more adjective here in the verse, which I don't see as how it's come into the translation, but anuvartini. Anuvartini, it means obedient. He was obedient. We don't really stress obedience very much in today's culture because of the pervasiveness of this notion that everybody is equal. But actually, obedience is really an essential necessity. There's a Christian, I think it's Cistercian order of monks. They take vows when they become monks. 3 vows: poverty, chastity, obedience. What does it mean to be a servant if you can't embrace these kinds of virtues? Poverty, in our terminology, that means nishkinchana or akinchana, having nothing for yourself. And chastity, that for women, chastity means chastity to the husband. For men, chastity means brahmacharya, retention of semen in particular. And obedience, this is a virtue everybody has to follow. Especially the disciple has to be obedient to the spiritual master. So Narad Muni had this qualification. As such, it's here written in Srila Prabhupada's purport, the Vedantavadis, or the followers of the Vedanta, indicate the pure devotees of the personality of Godhead. Such Vedantavadis or Bhakti Vedantas are impartial in distributing the transcendental knowledge of devotional service. And Narad Muni was able to serve those Vedantavadis. By such endeavor, even the most forgotten soul is roused up to the sense of spiritual life. And thus, being initiated by the Bhakti Vedantas, the people in general gradually can progress on the path of transcendental realization. So, the Vedantavadis initiated the boy even before he became self-controlled and was detached from childish sporting, etc. Now, it seems as if Narad Muni was saying he had these qualities and therefore he responded when the Bhaktivedantas initiated him. But here, Srila Prabhupada's purport suggests that Narad Muni did not necessarily have these qualities, so much at least, but because of their association, he quickly developed them. But before the initiation, Prabhupada continues here, he, the boy, became more and more advanced in discipline, which is very essential for one who wishes to make progress in the line. And then he brings up the point of Varnashram Dharma, in which small boys of after 5 years are sent to become brahmacharis at the Guru's ashram, where these things are systematically taught to every boy. If you want your children to be disciplined, well-behaved, full of virtue, and thinking highly, they have to undergo this system. It's almost impossible otherwise, because the parents' tendency, and especially the grandparents' tendency, is to spoil children. But Prabhupada continues, this training was compulsory. Note that word, compulsory. Not only to create good citizens of the state, but also to prepare the boy's future life for spiritual realization. A boy was injected with spiritual acumen before being placed by the father into the womb of the mother. This is another. He says here, the irresponsible life of sense enjoyment was unknown to the children of the followers of the Varnashram system. If you want your kid to grow up to be a first-class sense gratifier, Vishayi, then do nothing in terms of Varnashram. Just let him grow wild like the weeds. But here Prabhupada says, a boy was injected with the spiritual acumen before even being placed in the womb of the mother, because they're following Garbhadan Samskar, which Prabhupada very strongly emphasizes throughout all of his books. Both the father and the mother were responsible for the boy's success in being liberated from material bondage. We know from 5th canto, that is the point. That is the process of spiritual family planning. We have this word in English, family planning. What does it mean? It means abortion, family murder. But actually, real family planning means you control yourself. And then also you raise your children properly. That is responsibility. That is human. It is to beget children for complete perfection, not partial perfection. Now, listen how Prabhupada concludes his purport here. Very pithy, powerful words. He says, without being self-controlled, without being disciplined, and without being fully obedient, no one can become successful in following the instructions of the spiritual master. And without doing so, no one is able to go back to Godhead. Heavy words for consideration. Here, note again, the word obedient is included in Prabhupada's purport. Sridhar Swami in his commentary has glossed this word anuvartani as anukule, always favorable. Whatever, jokush biyagya, whatever you like, I'm going to, yes, sir, no argument. When I was a boy, it was very rare for children to talk back to their parents. Now, what to speak of talking back to their parents? Children sometimes come home and kill their parents. It's become that advanced because of the system of modern education. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Yadyapi te tulya darshanaha sushileshu dukkashileshu cha sat kurvatsu tiras kurvatsu cha sat achareshu durachareshu cha jagat janeshu yadyapi samadrishtayah kova tesham anugrahya kova nigrahyas tadapi mai kripam chakruhu. That is to say, because they were equal-minded, without considering whether somebody is well-behaved or ill-behaved, whether he's from a good family or from a bad one, whether he has good behavior or bad behavior, whatever his situation is, they look equally upon all the self-realized. So, and therefore, they should not show mercy to one and reject another in disgust. However, they showed mercy to me. Their initial showing of mercy did not depend on Nada's good qualities or showing of respect. He developed the good qualities by their mercy. If one says that though they had equal vision, they showed mercy because he showed good qualities, then their equal vision would be contradicted by seeing good and bad, and their mercy would not be causeless. We talk about causeless mercy. As a representative of the Lord, we as devotees have to extend the Lord's causeless mercy. We cannot judge or withdraw based on our own mundane calculation of who's fit and who's not fit. This is the point. So one should not explain in this way, because then the first mercy would be prejudiced. In other words, it would not be causeless mercy. Then he goes on to say, this is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, there are two kinds of mercy. One is affected by seeing material qualities, and the other one is not affected by seeing material qualities. He says, Kripa hi dvividha, gunamai va nirguna va. So the first type of mercy, gunamai mercy, everyone in the material world has mercy caused by some qualities. If they see some quality, they show mercy. If you see someone who is If you see that the qualities are absent, then you withdraw mercy. That is how we act in the material world, because we're impelled by the modes of nature. We're not actually making our own decisions. And if we see bad qualities, we show hatred. We become judgmental. The second type of mercy, nirguna mercy. That is to say, nirguna means without the influence of the modes. Then they show mercy without any cause. Causeless mercies, we said. Because they see everything in the material world is the same. Shukadev Goswami has said this in 10th Canto, chapter 20, text 36. During the rainy season, the mountains sometimes released their pure water and sometimes did not, just as experts in transcendental science sometimes give the nectar of transcendental knowledge and sometimes do not. It's unpredictable, it's causeless. And in this manner, sometimes these persons show mercy and sometimes we see. When the hardness of the heart is caused by gunas, when the hardness of the heart that is caused by guna sangha is destroyed and becomes soft by devotion to the Lord, then this kind of nirguna mercy will appear. This is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.3.1. Shuddha sattva visheshatma prema suryangshu samya bhak rushibhish chittamasranya krit asau bhava uchyate. It's actually Rupa Goswami's definition of bhava. Bhava means love. That part of bhakti is called bhava, whose essence is samvit and hladani shakti, the awareness and ecstasy potencies, which is one ray of the sun of prema, which will soon rise within the heart when it softens, and which softens the heart with desires to meet, serve, and exchange love with the Lord. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur concludes his comments on this verse by pointing out that the first 4 stages of bhakti are understood here. He has his own system. It's different than what we find in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we understand that we advance in stages. Pradur bhavet kramaha. But those stages are 9, beginning with Shraddha, then Sadhu Sangha, then Bhajana Kriya, Anartha-Nivriti, ityadi. I think we all know that much. But Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, throughout his writings, he maintains a different system, slightly overlapping system. He gives not 9 stages that we have to pass through to advance towards prema, but 14 stages. And the first of those 14 stages are 1, mercy of the devotees. Nothing happens without that, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. When you get the mercy of devotees, you are able to serve the devotees. That is the second stage, service to the devotees. What does he call it in Sanskrit? Satam kripa mahat seva. Yes. Shraddha guru parashraya. These are the next 2 stages he gives. Then you get faith. First, you get mercy from devotees. That mercy comes in the form of service to the devotees. Then faith arises. Faith arises from mercy and service. Then when you have faith, what do? Guru padashraya. This is his way of saying sadhu sangha. Because we've already described who is the sadhu. He is the punyatirtha, the person who is sinless and completely devoted to the Lord. Okay, so the first 4 stages of bhakti, he says, are illustrated in this life history of Narad Muni in this particular verse, which I should read again, just to let you see them. Although they were impartial by nature, those followers of Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. So that's the first thing. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sports. Even though I was a boy, in addition, I was not naughty, and I did not speak more than required. And we understand that he was able to render service. That is the second thing. Then his faith was aroused, and then he was able to take shelter of the Guru. Text 25. Uchishtalepan numodito dvijaihi sakritsma bhunje tarapashta kilbishaha evam pravrittasya vishuddha chetasas tad dharma evatma ruchit prajayate. That means, once only, by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by doing so, all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus being engaged, I became purified in heart, and at that time, the very nature of the transcendentalists became attractive to me. Purport. This is something we can all relate to during the pandemic. Prabhupada writes, pure devotion is as much infectious, in a good sense, as infectious diseases. Very nicely stated. Just think about this. Now, here in India at least, they're saying there's a new strain of COVID-19 that is 10 times more effective than the last strain, which was several times more effective than the previous strains. It's almost as if somebody has engineered this thing to wipe us out. Anyway, we can learn from this. Bhakti is the most infectious thing. Why? Because it resonates with us. When we see it, when we come in contact with it, when it is pure, in other words, then it resonates right away. We recognize it. Kashmir Shaivas have a word for this. Pratyabhijna, recognition. We say, yes, I know this already. This is true. We know it. So a pure devotee is cleared from all kinds of sins. The personality of God is the purest entity, and unless one is actually pure from the infection of material qualities, one cannot become a pure devotee of the Lord. That we know again from Narad Muni. Tat parat vena nirmalam. You have to become as pure as God in order to go back to God. You don't have to become one with God, but you become as pure as He is. Nirmalam. That is the point. So when we have that purity,
Hare Krishna. Vasanta Prabhu, are you able to hear something?
नहीं प्रभु जी, नहीं प्रभु.
I think Prabhuji has lost the connection now.
Okay, Prabhu. Okay. We'll wait.
Right.
We'll wait. Yes, Vasanta Prabhu. Prabhuji has joined. Hare Krishna, Vasanta Prabhu. Can you hear me?
Yes, Prabhuji. I'm doing just 1 second.
Thank you.
Okay, Hare Krishna. Radhe Radhe. Can
Yes,
you hear
Prabhu.
me?
Yes,
Okay,
Prabhu.
sorry.
Please.
What was the last thing you heard before we got cut off?
Prabhuji, you was mentioning about the Nirmalam, that
Yes.
description.
So we have to become as purified as the Lord is in order to approach the Lord. Srila Prabhupada says this in many places. And Narad Muni did this just by taking the remnants of their food, because the prasadam of the devotees, Maha Prasadam, it's very, very powerful, just like COVID-19 is very powerful. So infection of the qualities of the pure devotees means to imbibe the taste of pure devotion, always in the transcendental activities of the personality of Godhead. This transcendental taste at once makes all material things distasteful. Srila Prabhupada writes this in his purports. So, by the association of pure devotees, all inauspicious obstacles are removed. That's called anartha nivritti. Then one becomes attracted, one can have steadiness, one gets the taste that we were mentioning, and then one can approach the point of having transcendental emotions, bhava. All these stages develop by the association of pure devotees, and that is the purport of this stanza according to Srila Prabhupada. So, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur here says, Bhajaneshu Spriha Bhaktir Anarthapagamas Tata Nishtaruchir Iti Pancha Bhumika Anena Shlokarthena Shuchitagnya. It should be understood here that 5 more of his scheme of stages of bhakti should be understood in this verse. 1, he gets a desire to worship. Have we heard that? Yes, we have. This is exactly what Narad Muni is explaining. The very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. And then he adopted the path of bhakti. Bhakti is Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's way of saying bhajana kriya, as I understand it. And then what happens? Anarthapagama, that means anartha nivritti. And then nishtha ruchi, those are the same. He gets solid, steady, stable in his devotional service, and he gains a taste. We're seeing this. Okay, so text 26. Tatranvaham Krishna katha pragayatam anugrahenashravam manoharaha taha shraddhayame anupadam visrandvataha priyashravas mama bhavad ruchihi. O Vyastev, in that association, and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. And thus, listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Sri Krishna, the absolute personality of Godhead, is attractive, not only in his personal features, but also in his transcendental activities. The Lord descends on this material world out of his causeless mercy and displays his various transcendental pastimes as a human being, so that human beings attracted towards him become able to go back to Godhead. Men are naturally apt to hear histories and narrations of various personalities performing mundane activities. That's why we turn on the news. We have a natural aptitude for these things. Without knowing that by such association, Prabhupada continues, one simply wastes valuable time and also becomes addicted to the three qualities of mundane nature. How will you ever develop nirguna, bhakti, if you're constantly bombarding and filling your consciousness with the three modes of material nature? It is a waste of time. And do you have time? We don't know. Every day, especially nowadays, it seems every week, every day, practically speaking, somebody's dying. Either it's COVID-19 or among all my God brothers, another one is dying every day, it seems. So we don't have a lot of time. By the time your life is finished, you finally realize that there's actually not that much time available. So instead of wasting time, one can get spiritual success by turning his attention to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. By hearing about the personality of Godhead from within, all accumulated sins of the mundane creature are cleared. We are mundane creatures. Keep it in mind. You kind of have to picture some gross animal, and that's what our consciousness is actually like. And it's going to stay that way until we become cleansed from inside out. Narad Muni has just explained this by his personal experience. What is it? When you're cleared from sin, you gradually become liberated from mundane association and become really attracted to the features of the Lord. Keep in mind, this ruchi does not come until after anartha-nivritti. We have some shadow taste right now. That's what's inspiring us, keeps us working to any degree in Krishna consciousness, but the real taste has not yet awakened in most of us. There is a devotee here in Vrindavan. One of this devotee's students was only 35 with a wife and two young children. He died of COVID-19. He didn't want to wear his mask. And then now his wife is completely hates Krishna. She's mad at Krishna. She's completely given up Krishna consciousness because it just snapped her. So our faith even is not really as deep as we fancy. We're not that advanced, actually. And when we're severely tested, then we realize that we're not that advanced, if we're fortunate. Otherwise, we get even more covered. But this is the point. The whole idea, Prabhupada continues, is that simply by hearing about the Lord's pastimes, one can become one of the associates of the Lord. Narad Muni has just explained this by his personal experience. What is your personal experience? Why can't you have the experience that Narad Muni has had? We can. And Prabhupada says that here, one can attain to the highest perfection of life simply by attentive hearing of the transcendental pastimes of the Lord from the right sources. Don't go to an entertainer. There are some people who give pravachan and they just want to make you laugh and they want to make you have a good evening, and maybe they want to collect money. I don't know what their motive is, but you have to go to the person who is actually repeating the words of the spiritual master. And that means directly glorifying the Lord. This is the point. Otherwise, there is no point. So, the right sources, especially Srila Prabhupada, not had heard from the pure devotees, Bhaktivedantas. This process of hearing in the association of the devotees is especially recommended in this age of quarrel, Kali Yuga. Where is it recommended? Lord Brahma says, Chapter 14, 10th Canto, Text 3. Jnane prayasam udapasi namanta eva ityadi. Sthane sthita shruti gadam tunavang manobhihi. Even while remaining situated in your social position, whatever it may be, if you throw away the process of speculating and you engage your mind, body, and words fully in offering obeisances and describing the personality of Godhead and dedicating your life to these narrations and sharing them with others, then certainly you will conquer Krishna. This is the point. Otherwise, Krishna is unconquerable. Okay, so Tatreti Krishna Kathashri Nandanandasya Janmadi Lilaha, Jiva Goswami says in his commentary here. This Krishna Katha means especially stories about Nandanandan, the son of Maharaj Nanda, such as Janmashtami Lila. And then he quotes SrimadBhagavtam 10th Canto, Chapter 7, Text 2. Yat Shrinvato Paiti Aratir Vitrishna Satvam Shashudyatya Achirena Pungsaha Bhaktir Harau Tat Purushecha Sakhyam. The day said, King Parikshit told Shukdev Goswami, simply by hearing of these activities, the activities of child Krishna, the dirty things in one's mind immediately vanish. Generally, we are reluctant to hear about the activities of the Lord, but Krishna's childhood activities are so attractive that they are automatically pleasing to the mind and ear. Thus, one's attachment for hearing about material things, which is the root cause of material existence, vanishes. And one gradually develops devotional service to the Supreme Lord, attachment for him, and friendship with devotees who give us the contribution of Krishna consciousness. If you think it fit, sir, kindly speak about those activities of the Lord. This is his request, Maharaj Parikshit, very humbly requesting Shukdev Goswami, I want to hear. So this is Shushlusho, Shushusho Shraddhanasya, Vasudeva Katharuchi. When you serve the devotees, then you get ruchi, hote, if you go through the stages. Okay, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, Taha Shraddhayeti, Shraddha Padena Asaktir Dashami Bhumika. This is the 10th stage that you go in. You have Shraddha. Every moment or at hearing every word, I've developed Rati, Bhava for Krishna, whose qualities are pleasing to hear. This is not a Muni's idea. So Ruchi here should mean Rati, which is the 11th stage. This is in Vishwanath Chakravarti's scheme of things. Since the stage of Ruchi has already been described previous to this. So Ruchi is, in this particular verse, Ruchi actually means Rati. That's what he's saying here. So in other words, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he sees two more things happening, two more stages in this verse. One, Narad Muni has attained Asakti here, which is called in the verse as Shraddha. And Narad Muni has attained Bhava here, which is called Rati. Throughout his writings, as I mentioned already, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur tends to use this nomenclature. Instead of Bhava, he'll use the word Rati, which means the same thing. All right. Text 27. Tasmins tada labdarucher mahamate priyashravas yaskhalita matirmama yayaham etat sat asat swamayaya pashyemayi brahmani kalvidam pare. O great sage, as soon as I got a taste for the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching. And as my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings for both the Lord and I are transcendental. Purport. Ignorance in material existence is compared to darkness. And in all Vedic literatures, the personality of God is compared to the sun. Wherever there is light, there cannot be darkness. Hearing of the Lord's pastimes is itself transcendental association with the Lord, because there's no difference between the Lord and his transcendental pastimes. To become associated with the supreme light is to dissipate all ignorance. By ignorance only, the conditioned soul wrongly thinks that both he and the Lord are products of material nature. But in fact, the personality of Godhead and the living beings are transcendental. They have nothing to do with the material nature. Since the gross and subtle bodies are emanations from the personality of Godhead, the knowledge of light permits one to engage both of them in the service of the Lord. We said this in the beginning. This is Sambandha Gyan. The gross body should be engaged in acts of rendering service to the Lord, such as bringing water, cleansing the temple, making obeisance, etc. The path of Archana, or worshiping the Lord in the temple, involves engaging one's gross body in the service of the Lord. Similarly, the subtle mind should be engaged in hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, thinking about them, chanting his name, etc. All such activities are transcendental. Such realization of transcendental activities is made possible by many, many years of apprenticeship in the devotional service. But simply attraction of love for the personality of Godhead, as it was developed by Narada Muni, by hearing, is highly effective. Okay, so I'm going to conclude now, but I'm going to just briefly go over some of the points made here by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Having attained an excellent taste, my intelligence became steadily fixed in the Lord, he says, nodded. By that intelligence, I saw the gross and subtle body existing in me by the influence of the Lord's material energy to be established in Krishna. Yeah, so he goes on to actually just kind of reiterate the things that we've just read from Srila Prabhupada's purport, but his point is that previously the eye and the mind were not fixed in the Lord, even by exerting much effort, but that is not the case now. So we can get out of this great dense forest of illusion that we're in, the darkness that we're in. It will happen. We just have to persevere with enthusiasm, hearing from the right sources and making every effort to follow nicely. And again, pashye, the word here is used, I see. Chakravarti Pad says this means I directly experience. So he's become perfect. Text 28, final verse. Itam sharat pravrishikau ritu harer, Vishuntatvomenusavam yashomalam, Sankirtyamanam munibhir mahatmabhir, Bhakti pravrittatma rajastamopaha. During these 2 seasons, the rainy season and the autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great souls constantly chant the unadulterated glories of Lord Hari. As the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the modes of passion and ignorance vanished. Purport. Transcendental, loving service for the Supreme Lord is the natural inclination of every living being. The instinct is dormant in everyone, but due to association of material nature, the modes of passion and ignorance cover this from time immemorial. If by the grace of the Lord and the great souled devotees of the Lord, a living being becomes fortunate enough to associate with the unadulterated devotees of the Lord and gets a chance to hear the unadulterated glories of the Lord, certainly the dormant instinct of devotional service is at once awakened, and the flow of devotional service takes place like the flow of a river. As the river flows in the sea until she reaches the sea, similarly, she, because all rivers except the Brahmaputra, they're all feminine. Similarly, devotional service flows by the association of pure devotees till it reaches the ultimate goal, namely, transcendental love of Godhead. And of course, how can we not remember what Kunti Devi says here? Tvai me nanya vishaya matiram adhupate sakrata ratimudvahata ardha gange vaukhamudanvati. She's praying that may my consciousness be more and more on you without being distracted by anything or anyone else. And Kapila Dev also in the 3rd canto, he compares this devotional service to a great flow. Bilwamangala Thakur, he also says, Abhyarshageham yuvati pravriddha prema pravaha dati niramamant gayanti gopyotha sakhi sameta govinda damodara madhaveti. After finishing her home duties, a girl overflowing with love for Krishna churned butter and all of her friends came together and they all sang Govinda, Damodara Madhava. The phrase Pravritta Prema Pravaha has profound implications. SrimadBhagavtam 3.29, 11, and 12 suggests that the loving sentiments of pure devotees naturally flow towards Krishna, just as so many tributary rivulets forming into a great current eventually flow into the ocean. Srila Rupa Goswami especially compares Srimati Radharani's love to a powerful surge of floodwaters. Its movement toward Krishna cannot be checked, even by her relatives, social convention, or elders. That's in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Anjilila, chapter 1, text 155. Lord Krishna is the perfect ocean of auspiciousness, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Kalyana Gunarnava. But the flow of the gopis' love adds to this auspiciousness. Some of this water is taken up from that ocean into rain clouds and distributed as a gentle rain upon the parched souls suffering from conditional life in this great forest fire of material existence. A rain cloud can give water even to those who live far away from the ocean or to those trapped in a blazing forest fire. The bona fide spiritual master is therefore compared to such a rain cloud.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Krishna Krishna Krishna